In the last episode of this series, we began to think about verbal directions and how they can help us guide our movements during a gesture. But how do we put two, three, four or more directions into action simultaneously? Jando Masoero has created a framework for implementing verbal directions based in part on F.M. Alexander's work. It's quite simple. When you want to put a set of directions into action, you use your memory to recall the directions that you want to implement, you give yourself the directions through self-speech, and then, on a 1, 2, 3 count, you put all the directions into action simultaneously. For this 1, 2, 3 count, there is 1 second between 1 and 2, and 1 second between 2 and 3, so an adjustment takes 2 seconds. On 1, you begin the adjustment, on 2, you're in the middle of the adjustment, and on 3, you stop the adjustment. I think people undervalue what a clever creation this is, because really, it's not obvious what the best framework for putting an adjustment into action is. This plan for making adjustments works for a number of reasons. Firstly, it forces you to control the timing of your movements. While this may sound very simple, I've almost never had a new student who could easily make their adjustments on a 1, 2, 3 count. After some practice, anyone can do it, but at first, it's strangely difficult. People have a tough time controlling their movements with that level of precision, and this seemingly simple task, to restrict your adjustment to just the 2 seconds that you've given yourself, can expose that. The second aspect that is quite ingenious is that it gives us a definite stopping point. Let's say we return to the directions we looked at last episode, which were to, while sitting, lift the upper sternum forward and up, lift the lower sternum and lower ribs up away from the iliacs and pull them backwards, and to pull lumbar 3 forward and up. Once you've made that adjustment, your torso will be in a new orientation and in a different spot in space. One might think it's impossible to maintain their torso in that new spot without applying the same amount of force it took to move the torso to that new spot. But this is not the case. You are not better balanced when your torso is like this than like this. The reason that this feels easier to maintain is because it's what you're used to feeling. But it's not as if your muscles are working better in this configuration. In fact, it's the opposite. This is worse for your muscles and fascia. What makes a new posture difficult to sustain is that it goes against what your feeling sense is used to. If you stop your adjustment at 3 and stay where you are, you don't need to continue the movements. A good direction that is applied incorrectly will lead to a bad result. So you don't want to be moving indefinitely. You want to be moving for a controlled period of 2 seconds. Another great aspect of this system is that first you have an opportunity to think over your directions prior to the 1, 2, 3 count. Take as much time as you need for this part of the process. But then, the idea is to put all the movements into action simultaneously. Trying to do one direction and then another and then finally another would not produce the kind of due tension that we need to bring the body into proper poise. Restricting yourself to 2 seconds will help you make the actions all at once. Lastly, this system works because you can implement it whenever you want. Even if you are busy at work, you have 2 seconds. Granted, you will need a few more moments to remember your directions and set them in your mind, but in all, an adjustment does not take very long. So anytime you find yourself slumping or straining, arching or shortening, you can take a moment for yourself and consciously guide yourself towards a better configuration. So let's try to create another set of directions. Let's consider the back of the pelvis. At the back of the pelvis, you have your sacrum, which is a few of your vertebrae that have fused together to form a sort of bony plate. While you're standing, place one of your hands on your sacrum, so that the palm is on the top of the sacrum and your fingers are on the lower part of your sacrum. Which part of your hand is further forward towards the front of you, and which part is further back? Virtually everyone will find that their sacrum is inclined, and the top of the sacrum is forward, while the lower part of the sacrum is back. This makes perfect sense. We've seen in earlier episodes that most people are rotating their pelvis forward and down, which forms this sloping of the back of the pelvis that leads into the hollowing of the lower back. So now the question is, what kind of directions could we create to move our pelvis into a better configuration? For now, let's restrict our directions to just the sacrum. We can create a model of the sacrum for ourselves with a pencil or ruler. We can angle the pencil just like our sacrum. If we want to straighten the pencil, how many different ways could we do that? We'll certainly have to rotate the pencil, but what should the center of rotation be? And why? Think it over and then tune into the next episode, where we'll create a direction that can change how we stand.